Yeah. Hi, Stan Stahl, Secure the Village. This is our Tuesday happy hour. Technology and security, the intersection of those two spaces. That's what this is all about. And we'll meet once a month. We'll be hearing from our guests. We'll hear from all of you in a few minutes. But just, what we're about is that right on that intersection of IT and information security. So much of security lives there, not all of it, of course, but a lot of it. And that's what this meeting is about. We meet once a month on the fourth Tuesday of every month. And we kind of follow the same framework every month, introductions, because part of what we're all about is building community, people getting to know each other, because you never know what those relationships can come to and what they can mean, and how we all become valuable to each other that way. You'll hear from Di Kriebel, our co-host, our sponsor and co-host. Then we'll listen to Brad and Joe talk all about preparing for the inevitable breach and wrap up. So I want to start that with, as I said, Stan Stahl, this is Secure the Village. But beyond that, we are just rolling out our very first video. It's not yet completed. This, what you're seeing is the first cut, but it's like so right on that I got to show it. So enjoy the next 90 seconds.
Cybersecurity isn't simple. So if you think you're about to watch a cute video with bouncy music that tells you how what you thought was hard is actually easy, and what you thought was complicated is actually just like 1, 2, 3, rest assured, this isn't it. Because cybersecurity isn't simple, and what we do weaves together law, technology, risk management, governance, public policy, education, political philosophy, psychology, and even questions of freedom and war and peace. Cybersecurity isn't simple, but the values that motivate us are. The value that says we should treat others' information as we would like our information to be treated. That cybersecurity is an urgent civic duty for the 21st century citizen. And the value that says none of us is as smart as all of us. And that's why we're getting everyone involved, building bridges between those who dedicate their lives to cybersecurity and helping everyday citizens complete that last mile, transforming our neighbors into powerful cyber guardians. Cybersecurity isn't simple, but the values that motivate us are. And our values say that there's a seat at the table for anyone with something to contribute to the global exchange of knowledge we're building at Secure the Village. Because from the boardroom to the living room, it takes a village to secure the village.
There we go. Yeah, that's the first one. As you can tell, I'm excited by it. Elias Winshaw is our videographer, young man, and he's just got this knack of figuring out the story in a situation, in an organization. What is it? And I think he's done a fabulous job here. So happy to shout out to him. So with that, let's go around the room, everybody, no more than 15, 20 seconds, because otherwise we'll be here forever. And we do want to hear from Joe and Brad. But who you are, what you do, who you work for, whatever, but again, real short, put more information, use the chat box to put name, contact information, all of that, so we can build this village that we're all about. So with that, let me start. Steve, you're on our board. Steve Krantz, one of my friends and colleagues in this exercise.
Thank you, Stan. Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm a retired IBMer, and I got into cybersecurity by writing a couple of books about it. I put it in the chat box, and I'm excited to be leading the community engagement working group, which hopefully will lead us to engage the community, educate the community in cybersecurity issues, and we're working on multiple approaches to that. One, the most exciting, and I'll end with this, is a game, an app that we will release hopefully in the near future.
So we're looking forward to the app. It's going to be a game changer. Other board member as well, all the way from Sacramento, George Yusi, good, solid friend and supporter of everything we do.
Hi, George GC. Can everybody hear me? Yes, mute is off. George GC. I am the CEO of OmniStruct, a NIST security program consultant and compliance operations provider for MSPs and their customers, as well as mid-market enterprises. I also, as Stan mentioned, on the board for Secure the Village. I also chair the California IPv6 task force, where we're upgrading the internet, and quite a few other workforce development group initiatives I'm a mentor for.
Super. So glad you're here and on the board as well. One of the attorneys, and you saw him on the video, if you look closely enough, Tim Toohey. Tim and I have been friends again for a long time. And again, a longtime supporter of Secure the Village. Great, good to see you.
Great to see you, Stan, and lots of friends here as well from meetings. I'm an attorney at Greenfield, Gloucester in Century City. I specialize in a lot of aspects of privacy and security law. I also am a trial lawyer that has been involved in some matters that involve those issues and ongoing, but I also do advice to companies, particularly related to CCPA and GDPR and a lot of other alphabet soups. Great to see everyone, and great to have known Stan for so many years and to know Brad and others of you for many, many years as well.
Super. So glad you're here. I want to move to one of the newer people, Anush. God, you and I met just before lockdown, and then just as we came out of lockdown, we got the opportunity to reconnect.
Oh, thank you so much. No, very, very excited to be here. This is my first actual networking event with Secure the Village. So my name is Anush Sarabach. I am with Crown Castle. We are the largest neutral host cell tower carrier in the country. Macrosite cell towers, small cell 5G cell towers, and dedicated fiber optics that we own all end to end. We're here for all things infrastructure, and really can do any customized infrastructure network, which really kind of plays into the security, diversity, and hardening of any network of any company, enterprise, K through 12, or governmental. Thank you for introducing me.
Welcome. Glad you're here. And Ross, I think this is your first also Secure the Village event, isn't it? Ross Chapman from SGI.
Yeah, I'm listening to all your luminaries, wondering what the heck am I doing here? I thought there was going to be martinis. I mean, that was the really main reason to come to happy hour. So, hi, I'm Ross Chapman. I'm acting CIO for SGI USA. We're the largest Buddhist religious nonprofit in the U.S., which makes us probably on the small side of mid-market type of company, but we have a pretty hefty infrastructure. We're very security conscious, and I consider myself a student compared to everyone else here in the room. But we've used Stan and Brad's services and Joe in the past, and I'm just fascinated by the whole area and fascinated by what I can learn. And my biggest problem now is I've decided to get my CISM, and I'm not sure how to squeeze that into my schedule. Going back to school.
You'll get there. I'm confident of that. Diane Hernandez, right? I don't know if you're on camera, Diane, or.
Yes, sorry. Hi. Diane Hernandez. I'm with Shamrock. We're telecom and IT consulting, a leading agency for consulting, sourcing, and procurement for telecommunications, data center, and cloud services. And I met Stan a couple years ago out networking, out and about pre-pandemic, and I just love what he does here with Secure the Village.
Oh, super. Thank you so much, and glad you're here. I want to go to the other attorney, the second attorney in the group. Again, longtime friend Michael and I go back, good God, at least to the early 2000s. It's great to see you as well, Michael.
Thank you.
Okay.
Boy, if you're expecting me to advertise myself, I'll reprise what I said at the beginning. I'm here to listen to Brad, Joe, and the others without having to worry about the consequences.
Got it. Okay. Appreciate it.
And it's always informative. But just so everybody knows, I'm a partner at Jeffrey Mangels, Butler and Mitchell in Century City. I'm the co-chair of our cybersecurity and privacy group. I indeed have worked with Stan starting in the early twos, although I think it actually was 1999, Stan. A recent document so indicates. And I've been working with Brad and then with Brad and Joe for years and years and years on lots and lots of security incidents, of which I am now swamped with.
I hear you. We all, I think, are getting more and more swamped as that goes. Glad you're here. Let's see. Rick, haven't seen you in a couple of months. Welcome back. Good to see you.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm a little late.
No problem. Yeah, just briefly introduce yourself. Yes,
My name is Rick Badine. I have a small IT consulting business, Bit Corporation, and infrastructure, cybersecurity, virtualization, basically in the SMB market.
Cool. Well, again, as always, so glad you're here. Want to move off to one of the inventors in the group, Steve Gilford. Again, longtime friend, colleague, who's really doing some exciting stuff at the. Well, why don't you say it, Steve?
Hi, thank you, Stan. Greetings, everybody. I guess the best way to put this is I've been writing computer software for nearly 40 years, and if we're going to solve any of this, we're going to have to figure out a whole new paradigm that is secure by design, as we like to say. So the gist of it is that we can take unstructured data and business logic out of the middle tier, shove it in the Oracle database, turn the Oracle database into a modern mainframe architecture. The middle tier becomes synonymous to the old network controllers of old, and all it does is perform a network. It's a elastic security isolation layer for the data layer formed by the database. And so the cyber security implications are pretty simple. If you move all of your unstructured data out of the file system and abandon the file system, which is an archaic technology, ransomware doesn't know how to infect your files anymore.
Yeah, it's again, these new paradigms are just so important. You reminded me, in fact, someone I have to introduce you to who plays at the chip level. But you two guys will get along. Dawn, good to see you. Welcome. Glad you're here. Brief introduction for everybody. Dawn, you're muted.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, here on the East Coast, I've got a couple other things cooking, but I wanted to say hi to Michael and hi to my buddy Brad, and looking forward to an interesting overview by you guys. Thanks.
Super. Well, thank you. Glad you're here. With that, I think I got everybody. I was looking at these neurotically, like, God help me if I miss somebody, whatever. But I think we're all covered except our host and sponsor, Cradle. So you get the floor. Tell us what's going on in the market. Good God. I mean,
absolutely. My head is spinning. So Cradle Delson, owner of DKKD Staffing, been doing this for 20 years. Been known Stan for 20 years. Thanks, Stan. We originally met at, I think, like an IEE meeting, something like that, 20 years ago, and fast forward, have been staffing. I've staffed most of the IT people at the company that acquired Stan's business, Miller Kaplan Erase. And so now it's kind of exciting to have Stan as a client as well. So I've worked with him for many, many years. My office is located in Westlake Village, California, yet I staff all over the US. My geography niche is Southern California. I staff mostly IT and security, and I love security. It actually led me to my now husband. Many years ago, he was a client of mine, so it actually turned out to be very beneficial. Being interested in IT and security and technology, and it was kind of funny him being a client of mine. We have many stories over the years of knowing the same people, so it makes it kind of fun. fast forward to this year in security, it's crazy. We can't find enough people. If you're a hiring manager, you understand there are just either there are people on the market who apply for security who are a physical security person and not an information security individual or engineer, and we have to filter through that. So if you're, like I said, if you're on the hiring side and you work with recruiters, understand that we get maybe for one position at least 100 applicants and have to filter through those and find the ones and read through the resumes and screen them to find somebody who just might fit, who might be available at the time. Remote is a definite challenge these days. If your company is going for 100% in person, work on site, that's been a challenge. I've quite a few candidates who are saying that they will only work remotely. And then on the flip side of having the challenge of clients being open to remote, it opens up kind of Pandora's box for applicants. I get applicants from all over the world. So it makes it even more complex to try to filter through, not only navigate through my own network over 20 years, but then we're also dealing with everybody who applies. So if you're a job seeker, just understand that most agencies, most recruiters, companies, when you apply to it, what they're going through is hundreds of resumes and hundreds of applicants. I have a steadfast rule at my company. I try very hard to reply to every single person that applies, just out of respect. I have job openings anywhere from CTO, VP, down to help desk. So it's applications, infrastructure. If you know people on the market, I think I have over 30 job openings right now that we're working on. And they're Southern California, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Santa Clara. I mean, it's all over the place. So keep your ears open for people that you know that are looking, or if you think of somebody who's ideal, keep me in mind, please. The reason why I get involved in Secure the Village is not just because of Stan, but obviously spread the word, help people out, network them. A lot of people are challenged on where to look for work. I even help the CIO for Valley Presbyterian out here in Simi Valley, California. Saw one of my postings. It was just a job lead, wasn't even mine. I referred him in, he got the job. So I'm willing to do that as well. I've been doing this for a long time. So I'm here to help people. And one of the reasons, like I said, for doing events like this is to hopefully get the word out that I'm here to help. So again, reiterating, please keep me in mind if you know people who are on the job market or might be on the job market, or maybe even they're not, and I put in the chat my website, my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect. I'm not a salesperson. I'm not going to hound you like a regular recruiter does. I'm here to try to fill my jobs for my clients.
That was, I think, I wonderfully said, because it's so reflective of everything I've seen about you over the many, many years that we've known each other, that you're one of those people that really cares that the other is.
I love my job.
Yeah.
I absolutely love my job.
Connecting the people, making it happen, and the connections that you do as well for Secure the Village. Every week, your newsletter that goes out with all your open positions always talks about what our events are as well. Right. I mean, it's just, if anybody wants the model of what it is to be, really out in the community, doing good in the community, DI is that. So grateful for everything you're doing.
Oh, can I do a plug? I can do a plug real quick for charity work. I'm a co-founder of an event. If anybody's a cyclist, it's called Operation Ride for the Red, and it's in the Ventura County areas, and it raises funds and awareness for a program called Service to the Armed Forces for military and veterans, and they do everything awesome. We always look for sponsors too, and donations, even if you're not a cyclist. What the program does is they are the only connection between civilians and deployed soldiers and military folks. The only way you can get a message out to them, they're there for the deployment, they're there for when they return, and they're there for mental and financial and medical, whatever help that they need. Not many people know about it. And it's a division of Red Cross because Red Cross doesn't advertise. So that's one of the reasons we founded the event.
If you put something in the chat box,
Okay, will do.
website, so we can all go to and, donate, look up, see what they're about, and
Will do.
if it's right
Thanks, Dan.
for us, let's support it. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. This is great. So again, God, thank you all for all of it. Just, you can see the kind of very eclectic kind of mixes of people we get. And that's part of what the whole vision of Secure the Village is getting everybody involved. With that, you're not here to, see me or hear whatever. You're here for Brad and Joe, longtime friends. It's grateful. I mean, Brad, I remember the email. I think I still have the email you sent me when you were leaving the Bureau. I was president of ISSA at the time, the LA chapter here. And we met and we've been friends ever since. And Joe, you also. So I'm going to stop sharing, let you guys share, and just take it away.
Thank you, Stan. And just in front of everybody, I want to sing a couple of praises.
Cybersecurity isn't.
Sorry.
Just want to sing your praises, despite that little glitch. If you weren't for Stan, we wouldn't all be here. So, Stan, bless your heart. Thanks for all you're doing for all of us. I mean, you're a spearhead to pretty much everything we're doing. So, hang in there and keep doing it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
In the meantime, I know probably at least a quarter, if not more, of the people on the call today, and I'm thrilled to see you. Thanks for showing up. Always great to touch base with you again. As Stan mentioned, Joe and I are Maryman Associates Incorporated, and we are digital forensics, incident response, and cyber investigations. It seems like lately incident response has taken over like crazy, between ransomware and just a variety of incursions into corporate networks.
We're having trouble hearing you, Brad.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now? A little closer?
It's a little muffled.
How about now? A little better? Okay, good. As I mentioned, Joe and I are here basically to talk about, well, what to do. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Folks are going to get compromised at some point. There's just no question about it. I don't think anybody's going to escape it. If you do, it's literally a miracle. But for those persons that do have an issue, don't fear too much. Two things will really play well for you. One of them is being prepared for it, and the other one is calling us. Here's your second joke.
Yep.
In any case, we want to run through a little bit of a scenario today, or actually a number of scenarios, but we want to fulfill them into a set of info pieces that we have for what it means to put everything together and make sure you're prepared for the event when it actually happens. There it is. It's showing up now.
Yeah, it was my bad. I not enabled it for you, but
No problem.
No worries.
Yeah.
And Brad, you're still a little muffled on our end.
And not sure how I'm going to cure that now. That's the only microphone I have here.
Oh, okay. Can you guys hear me okay?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. And Brad, you're going in and out.
Yeah.
A lot of times you're fine. Other times,
I think this is Brad's way of just having me do the presentation.
Always happy to have you take it. I will take the bows at the end, though.
Sounds good. So yeah, as Brad said, it's, what we even talked about this yesterday, how 5 years ago was 20% IR and 80% forensics, and now it's 50-60% of our work is incident response. It's just it's exploding before our eyes, and so a large driving part of that is the modern workforce, circa March 2020 to the present is what we're seeing today. You know, everyone's afraid to go outside now with the Delta variant running around, and you know, everybody's getting sick, and so everyone's still working. I mean, everyone's still kind of working remotely. I mean, who's back in the office? I mean, we've got essential workers, we've got hospitality, retail, but who else is full-time back in the office, just like Di was talking about? Nobody wants to go into the office full-time. And so your network perimeter is non-existent, and everyone's connecting all sorts of devices that they have at home and whatever cameras and IoT devices they have on hand to your corporate network. And yeah, that's a recipe for, you know, wonderful things to happen, right? So, you know, like Brad said, and like, you know, Michael and others have said, you know, we get calls on one of the worst days of people's professional career, you know, going into work, remotely logging in, seeing that ransom message on there, and all your data is encrypted and all the backups are encrypted, and you're like, oh, wonderful, this is going to be a great Monday. So yeah, because as Michael has said, you know, Friday is breach day. Friday night is breach night. So Monday is when we get to go in and see all the, you know, disasters left behind. But even as we come out of COVID, because, well, who knows when that's going to actually happen? I mean, how many people really think that we're going to go back to a full-time 9 to 5 in the office and the workforce? I mean, Google, Apple, and Microsoft have all pretty much said that it's not going to happen for their workforce because, well, we're still able to get stuff done, surprisingly. So I wanted to bring up this slide to remind everyone how bad are things. So, you know, it's interesting when we were looking at these slides because I had some statistics from 2019. So, you know, IC3 is getting 2,000 complaints a day, and that's an increase of 700 from 2019 per day. And our losses are in the 11.5 million per day on average from cyber incidents. And a lot of us are on the West Coast in California. We're number one for number of attacks and financial loss. Not sure if that's something that we want to be number one for, but hey, we're number one. So yeah, as Brian and I were putting this together, we looked at this and he goes, well, that's our job security, but that doesn't really help our clients much. So yeah, we're in the business where if people don't call us, we assume everything's going well until they discover that things are not going well.
Yeah, you want to bring the it to full screen?
Oh yeah, I can do that. Let's do. How's that? Is that better?
I think it will be. Yeah, there we go.
Cool. No problem. So how bad are things? Well, Brad and I have been doing this for a long time. Observation from our own cases is ransomware demands have skyrocketed. We've seen ransomware go from $5,000 for decryption to $15,000 to $80,000 to $450,000. And well, we all said the headlines with Kaseya this year of Revil wanted $70 million combined from all of the Kaseya victims in order to release the decryption keys. Obviously, they released it without getting the ransom, or perhaps they got paid. We you know, there's not a lot of information about that, but our own clients have experienced ransom demands closer to $1 million this year. So, you know, last year, Brad and our eyes, you know, got really big when we saw close to $500,000, but now it's been closer to $1 million this year. But that's all negligible compared to what is happening behind the scenes, because it's been since 2019. So it's now been almost 2 years since we've had a ransomware case that has only been ransomware. The ransomware is the fire at the front of the building while they take all of your data out the back. And it's
it out the back.
I'm sorry?
Or have already taken it out.
Or have already taken it. Exactly. They've already stolen all of your data. They've been in there for a long time or a little bit of time, as we've seen lately. But it's amazing how much damage can be done in a couple of hours. And that's something I'll talk about a little later. It's so if you see ransomware, the ransomware is not the scary part. The scary part is how much data has already been stolen. And I just want to make it really clear, because I've talked with a lot of former, in addition to being with Maryman Associates, I'm also the associate professor at USC, and I have 15 years of students at different consulting companies. None of us have seen ransomware only cases for the last couple of years. All of them have had data theft. So if you see ransomware, if you see a client with ransomware, if you have a friend who's gotten ransomware, assume data has been stolen until you can prove otherwise. And at least in California, that's the triggering. Well, I'm not a lawyer, I can't say this for certain, but based on the lawyers in the room, I would assume that that's the trigger for Cal CPA, not the ransomware. Of course, I defer to Timothy and Michael for that assessment.
We'll we'll monitor your presentation and give you comments a little later. So far,
Perfect.
so good. So
oh,
far,
well,
so
thank you very
good,
much. So when you call us or when you call another company, you see that ransomware screen, you're like, panicked, and well, as soon as you get your jaw off the floor and you start calling DFIR companies, understand that what we're trying to do is get you those answers as quickly as we can. And we'll tell you right now that preparation is key. Even though I'm a Trojan, I'm going to defer to John Wooden, one of the greatest coaches of all time, who said, those that fail to prepare to fail. And that's what today is all about. It's how do you prepare your organizations, your clients, your friends, your coworkers, how to really get prepared for this, because like Brad and others have mentioned, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And the slower we get data, the more costly the investigation. And we want to provide definitive answers. And if you are not prepared for the breach, we can't provide definitive answers. One of the key things we want to do is reduce that size of the scope of affected individuals. And the only way we're going to do that is by being able to define the data that may have been taken. And we can't do that if it's not properly prepared.
And not when Joe was talking about things being slow, it also means sometimes, as a matter of fact, we see it quite often, is that the duration for logs for many of the systems that have been affected are days rather than months, and certainly not a year's worth. So if it's 2 days, if you take 5 days to get it to us, we're not getting the information that we would need to actually take a look at what was happening at the time of the infection or the ransomware.
Yeah, I mean, a really good example of this was a breach that we had a couple of months ago, where one of the key logs that we needed only spanned 2 hours. And it's like 2 hours worth of logs is, well, it's not going to give me the information I need. So, so what are we trying? What do we want these logs for? What are we trying to answer? Again, first and foremost in my mind, in our minds, and again, this is per counsel and per the length of time we've been working on these types of cases, is what data was affected and what was done to it. Was it accessed? Was it copied? Was it modified? Was it encrypted? What was done to it? And identifying that affected data is actually more important than attribution and knowing who did it, because again, we're trying to think of the impact financially to the organization. So in order to answer the what, we need to answer the when was it improperly accessed or manipulated. We want to try to build a timeline for what data may have been touched. That way we know we narrow down that scope, because otherwise, if we can't narrow it down, most attorneys are going to defer to everything. So, which we obviously don't want to have happen. How did the incident occur? Well, that's going to prevent them from getting it next time, which yes, it does happen. We had a case where I call it one investigation for the price of two, because they didn't follow our recommendations the first time, and 2 weeks later, lo and behold, they got hacked again.
And it was not the same group.
No, yeah, not the same group, different group, same vulnerability. who was the unauthorized person? Was it internal? Was it external? And what were the intentions of the unauthorized access? Was it, based on threat intelligence? Was it theft of IP, ransom, revenge, PII, financial? What, kind of what was the whole purpose behind the attack? So these are just some of the things we're trying to answer, and in a priority. Any questions? Okay. I realize we actually have a lot of slides and not that much time left, so I will try to go fairly quickly. So oftentimes you'll call a company that advertises both digital forensics and incident response, or maybe they're just advertising incident response. There is a difference between the two. So digital forensics assumes that everything that is done will be adjudicated in a court of law or will be scrutinized in the lens of the law. So everything we do has to be legally sound and legally tested, as opposed to incident response, which is containing, mitigating, remediating an attack or breach. But there's an implicit assumption that the people committing the attack are in a location where basically they're untouchable by the law, or they're in a position where legal remedies would be either too costly or take too long or various other things. So so that's really what the incident response aspect of it is
What
compared to
Joe's trying
forensics.
to say here really is that so many of the origins of many of these events are in locales, geographic locations that are uncooperative, to say the least, with U.S. government regulations, and thumb their nose at any civil subpoena that might come their way.
It doesn't help that hacking and cybercrime is part of their GDP. So,
Hey, Joe,
Yep.
I got a question for you. You're putting the information from the lens of a legal proceeding that's happening after the fact. Are you guys really kind of saying, look, there is a financial impact and a loss, and there's probably insurances that mitigate this type of liability? So you're saying that you have to be able to have these types of logs and information really effectively, so you can present that to the court of law or the insurance company or what have you. Is that kind of the context?
Yes. So where I'm going with this is, most of the time when we're working with internal or outside counsel on a breach, the big questions that are going to be asked is what states and or what individuals' data was affected, and what states are they located in, to know if I need to make a reporting to the individuals or to those states' attorney generals, or perhaps to any federal regulations, because if they don't report it and it's found out that there was no reporting, the losses and the fines and everything else are going to be astronomical compared to, doing things correctly. And most companies that we work with want to do the right thing. If they get hacked, they want people to know that their information was affected. They don't want to, they're not exactly trying to hide it, but they want to do things right. And as opposed to other, and I've heard of other DFIR firms that and attorneys that just say, well, we got hacked, it's ransomware, assume everyone was hacked. That's not how we do things. We want to make sure that we know this data was touched, this data was not touched. We have evidence of one versus the other, and we did a thorough investigation in order to ascertain that information.
Interesting. Wow, that's amazing.
Well,
Yeah.
actually, Joe, you might want to point out that all of these elements are in play when you're engaging in your forensic investigation. For instance, I worked with you guys where there was a painstaking forensic process to deal with the identification of people whose information actually was compromised, as opposed to people whose information we thought might be compromised, and the delta was in the many thousands.
Yeah.
And as a result of the work that Joe did, we were able to narrow that. And one of the only reasons we were able to narrow that is because there was a fair degree of evidentiary material to work with. But we've had situations where the evidence has been so light that the forensic folks, and it doesn't make any difference how good they are. In fact, it becomes more pronounced when they're operating at the level of Brad and Joe, where they're just not going to speculate about what got touched, what got accessed, what got exfiltrated.
Yeah. And that's really the whole purpose, thank you, Mike, because that's the whole purpose behind this presentation is the better prepared you are, the faster we can get to these answers, and the more definitive of those statements we can make, where we can say, yes, you have 1 million records in your organization. They were only targeting these 10,000. We know they were only getting to this 10,000 records, and we have the evidence to show that.
And if I may add, I mean, we've been talking about the legal side of things, and while that is certainly, it's an imperative mission for us, but on the other hand, we're often brought in very soon after the incident has been noticed by the company. So in those, it's also another mission for us to determine, is the threat actor actually still in their network? Is it over, or are we seeing things that are going about where, like, some of them we've seen where we were closing back doors and they were opening new ones while we were doing it. It was playing whack-a-mole with back doors in the network. We finally had to shut everything down and look at the entire system and take everything offline to be able to get rid of the infection.
And that was directly, I think I've got that in a couple of slides. I want to come, Brad, I want us to come back to that point, because I want to see, that might be, it's in a couple slides, but let's come back to that, because one of the things to remind everyone on is there is a life cycle behind what we do and how we do things. So again, today we're really talking about this preparation stage, because once we get called, we immediately go into detection, analysis, containment, eradication, recovery, and post-incident activity. That whole, are they still in the network? And again, 50% of the time, the answer is yes, they are still in there. You haven't gotten them out yet. And that's the scary part. So how are your incidents going to be discovered? And really it kind of falls into 4 different buckets. You're going to have some staff reporting, some things, calling up IT help steps. Hey, what is this Revil group that I see on my screen? And what's this ransomware thing? And why aren't any of my documents open? Or, my password's not working anymore. I tried typing it in 4 or 5 times. It's the same password, and I get locked out because it was an incorrect password. And yeah, there's no Prince of Nigeria. Yeah, sorry. Then, you've got your internal detection, which, by the way, staff self-reporting and internal detection are always better than external. So if your ITIS staff is noticing a lot of SSL traffic going to Russia, that's a good thing for your organization, because hopefully we can get in there quick enough to be able to shut this thing down. Or they go through an admin audit and they're like, there's about 3 different domain admin accounts that shouldn't be there. Well, call us immediately. And then you have external customers where, Visa, you get a call from Visa saying, I've got 50 different customers and all of them say that they used their credit cards at your site and all of them got compromised. So you've got something to deal with. Or we had this in one particular instance where clients are reporting that someone filed with the IRS before they did, and it was a tax preparation company. That wasn't so fun for them. The worst is probably when you see your company name on the front of Krebs on Security. We've gotten those calls. It's like, who's this Brian Krebs guy, and why is my company name on his front page? And I'm like, well, it's not a good Friday for you.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
or Joe, when you get a telephone call from Mandiant.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? I hope I'm not jumping ahead here. But
no, please.
It almost feels like what you're talking about here are you getting a bunch of clients that have actually no preparation for this at all. And we put in place, a FIP service. And so that anytime we changes a configuration, Tripwire tells us, if we have that example, all that traffic to Russia. I mean, we have things. I mean, we have automation and tools,
right,
that alert us because we're busy doing other things. There's no way a human being is going to notice stuff like that.
Yep.
If you're in a lean and mean department when you're just fulfilling customer requests, right? So I guess where I'm going with this is, do you have, and I know this is always going to be changing, but I've always thought it'd be good to put together some sort of security playbook. Here's the minimum type of tools you should have if you're running an IT infrastructure.
You're about 5 or 6 slides ahead of me.
Okay, I'll mute now. Sorry.
No, that's fine. It's fine. I know where you're going with it, Ross, and I have those answers for you.
So I'm sorry, I have to insert my question because it is related to the other question.
Please.
Instead of tools, what competencies do you see that are just that you consider sacred for every company to have that are missing in these companies that get hacked? Whether it's a managed service provider in use or in-house staff, like, is it a CIPT from IAPP? Is it, somebody who has, that's what I'm looking for as well. So it's not always about the tools.
No, I would say, and Brad, chime in on this. One of the biggest things when we come into a breach is having a team that knows their competencies and knows where the deficiencies are and knows who to bring in to augment and trust those individuals. It is fantastic when we work with a team that we've been through a tabletop with them. We've been through a previous breach. They know what we can do. They know that we're not there to step on their toes. We're there to help them get to the bottom of this and get out as quickly as we can. But it's those teams that see us as adversarial of, oh, they're going to watch everything we're doing and they're going to take my job away. I have no interest in going into IT right now. I'm quite busy on forensics. So it's those teams that it instead becomes a hindrance to what we're trying to do. So I would say first and foremost is really doing a skills assessment within your organization and seeing where your competencies are, and whatever you're lacking, make sure you have those outside experts ready on hand, agreements filled out, tabletops done, everyone knows their roles to be able to come in exactly when things start to go wrong.
Yeah. If I might add, George, quite frankly, it is tools as well. It is an absolute hand-in-hand thing. Competencies, and we have seen this in any number of organizations where the staff were well hired, they were competent, they were dedicated, they wanted to do a good job. Financially and business-wise, they were flat out not supported by their administration, by their executives. Requests were made for expenditures in certain areas, denied. It's working. It's not broken, so I'm not going to pay more money to fix something that's not an issue. So for us, the proper tools and the proper competencies are really the key. You can't do one without the other.
And I would add, Brad, what I see recurringly is leadership. Obviously, I think you're right on with that. The communications framework, critical in place, visibility into your network, but absolutely crucial. Responding to a ransomware attack is like dealing with a stroke victim. One of the things we see recurringly is people are not doing what needs to be done in the first 15 minutes to a half an hour.
Yeah.
And that can very often make or break a response. That has to do with the communications framework. It has to do with leadership. Visibility is obviously important. But when you haven't tabletopped, and actually even a tabletop is really not, in my way of thinking, very effective, unless you've gone through a real emulation using a real problem set. It almost doesn't make any difference how good your people are. They have to have been through that game plan many times to understand who to call, what plugs to pull, how to efficiently segment networks when they can be segmented. So those first few minutes are absolutely crucial.
Yeah, I agree completely, Michael. To the point of, we have one particular firm, and Joe will know immediately who I'm talking about, that we got called very early on. We actually had a prior incident with them about 2 years prior. And when we spoke with the chief IT person at the firm, we had advised them, well, you're under attack. You need to pull the plug, remove the network cable right now. It took him 3 hours to find out which cable to do that with.
Yeah.
It just says something as absolutely insanely simple as that was not something that they and had to find, they had to go to their service provider to tell them which one to pull.
Well, that all of this discussion leads me to kind of like the sacred thing that we will need when this breach starts. And for Ross and George, this is, I would say that if there's one thing that I wish 100% of people had on hand, ready to go the moment we get called, it's a network map. Something as simple as a network map. All of your systems, IP addresses, ports, and roles.
Segments, everything.
Segments, everything. And how many, how many clients do you think have that ready to go on hand in the last 2-3 years for us to do our breaches?
Does that include the clients who think they have one?
That's including the clients who think they have one. How many do you think have had it on hand ready to go on the day of the breach?
Yeah, I'm one of those clients that think I have it too.
Yeah, it's things haven't changed since the 90s. It was the same way back in the 90s.
It's exactly right. It's the same thing in breaches that in the 90s and the 2000s and the 2010s. We just had a ransomware breach that we did in our investigation on. I asked day one for a network map. They gave me a list of server names and I said, what are their IP addresses? And I got nothing. And lo and behold, I built the network map from the servers I had available. And I said, I've got 5 out of the 6 systems that were moved to by the hackers. Where's the last one? And I still don't have a response.
Wow.
Still waiting. The report's done. And I still don't have that last server.
They're still logging into SolarWinds.
So network map is.
Excuse me, Joe, one second. There's really been no change since the 90s as far as IT firms, IT groups, and what actually is on a network. You've got ad hoc groups, marketing or someone else will add something to the network that the IT doesn't even know about. They don't support it because they don't know about it. That hasn't changed. We still see ad hoc systems on a network that literally no one in IT knew existed. And we're saying, well, it's being pinged right now. What is this? We don't know. Someone checked to see, here's the IP address. Well, it was a printer, but it was a multi-function workgroup printer with a great deal of access to the rest of the network. But it was purchased by the folks in finance, and finance had a support arrangement with the vendor. So
and the admin the admin account and password for that printer is printer.
Yes.
Why am I not surprised?
Yes, this was a case of ours about 6 years ago, by the way.
Well, at least it's a long password.
Exactly. There you go. So in addition to the network map, the data map is also key. It's not as important for our day one of where do they come in, where do they laterally move, but in order to get an idea of where your critical data is stored to see, what potential data is impacted, we do need a data map as well. So what is your business critical data? Where is it stored? How is it accessed? Because this is all of the breadcrumbs that we're using to map out what the hackers have done. Again, how many organizations do you think have up-to-date data maps? I'll tell you, it's less. 2? Yeah, it's a lot less than the network map. I'll tell you that.
Well, one of the things that is really key. I mean, so many companies that we go into don't even understand the need for it, but don't have a grasp on whether they're keeping personally identifiable information, whether they're keeping health information, investor information, credit cards, social security numbers. And they say, here immediately, the first, we don't keep any of those things. Well, you have employees, right? Yes. Well, you have HR records in, right? Yes. Don't they have social security numbers and insurance accounts and birth on? All of those do, yeah, but that we don't keep that. HR keeps it, but they're on your network. I mean, it's a round robin, but it's unusual for us to find a firm that is well aware of the types of information they keep, as well as where that information exists.
Yep.
Because that's what we want to be able to compare with the lateral movements of the threat actors inside the network. If we see them spending time in a particular segment, it helps us to know that that's also where all of the investor relations or all the health information, all the HR information. So having that data map is really crucial for us to finish. It's not crucial for the first day, but it's pretty crucial 2-3 days in.
And for everyone who likes keeping, to remind people of their birthdays and send birthday cards and things like that, please don't include the year in the Outlook card for that person. Month and day is fine, but do not include the year.
So I understand that there's a lot of mistakes being made out there, and I think what we're seeing is executives and our leaders are really grappling there. How do I? With the question I get often is, how the heck do I do this? How do I get my team to have a mindset that's cyber aware? Because I mean, ultimately, I think that's when it comes to that point where somebody does have to bring in DFIR, or they're in a position already where they probably miss things, and all an executive or an owner or a leader really wants to know is, how do I get there? So and at a high level, they have to rely on their teams, whether it's a service provider, outsource, or internal IT team. So, and granted, it is frustrating from our perspective to see, lack of network maps, lack of data maps, as well as, mistakes that are often made. And so the mindset component is the piece that, if you could help us understand, what is the most taboo mindset you've ever seen in a company that is just disastrous, that as Secure the Village and helping organizations understand what kind of mindset to have, what are those taboo things that you've seen that you want to raise your hand and say, these are things within, whether it's cultures or things that are soft skills that really we don't want to see happening inside of an organization when we're doing our work. Whether it's negative talk about the business or IT, whatever, just kind of, what have you seen is really what I'm asking, that you just wish you wouldn't have seen or heard.
A couple of things, George. Really, the worst one probably is when the CEO or a very senior executive is literally the worst offender to all things data security for an organization. Okay. That sets a tone. It signals to the rest of the employees that it's okay to be like this, to click on the links, to watch porn at the office, to go outside the confines of the network, add your own network in. You've got a separate Wi-Fi address that you're attaching to the network for your use inside your large office. And you're sharing that with not only other people in the office, but with people outside the office. Just that virtue signaling that, okay, here it is. We don't care. I don't care about it, so you don't need to care about it. That permeates an organization, and it's very difficult for IT or anyone else who understands those risks to overcome that. Where we see the most effective things are where there's just the opposite. You see a senior executive or the CEO who signals to them by his actions that it is important. We are to pay attention. There are rules here for a reason, and they don't. They accept the nuisance, if you will, of two-factor authentication. Some people say, no, I don't want to bother with that. Well, then accept the fact that you're going to be breached even sooner than everyone else. Where we see the CEO not only talk about doing the right things, but he'll spend the money to bring people in. Like ourselves, we have training programs for the initial setup of incident response policies, incident response training. They bring in people like that. It's signaling, again, it's giving the tools to the people who are going to need them, as well as the signaling to them that I'm taking this seriously and you should too.
And Brad, what you're talking about is the exact, I was a project manager for some really large multi-million-dollar projects for many years. And project management 101 in terms of the number one risk to a project is lack of executive sponsorship. And that's exactly what you're talking about.
Very much
So
so.
if the organization isn't behind a particular initiative, sooner or later it's going to fail, usually sooner, right?
Very much so. I mean, you're
Yeah.
crippling the very thing that's trying to protect you.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, I'm certain that Brad and Joe will agree with this. We see over and over again a level of what I would call hubris and unfounded confidence in frameworks. It's very, very difficult to penetrate. You know, that's really an enlightenment and leadership issue. And we've run into situations where we knew fairly early on, whatever that veneer was comprised of, we were not going to penetrate it. It is just kind of an in and out, deal with the forensics, deliver the report, you know, take care of the fallout. But nobody was going to buy the proposition that anything in their environment had to be significantly improved. Still happens all the time. I mean, you run into it with great frequency, particularly among IT leads who have a level of self-confidence about their forensic and network architectural knowledge that simply has no basis in reality.
Yeah, and I'll confirm that as well, Michael. I mean, we see that we've seen that in some really egregious situations. That awareness, that assumption of knowledge. What was it? It's Mark Twain. It's not what people don't know that get them into trouble. It's what they do know that just ain't so.
Well, sure. I mean, you run into it all the time, Stan. You know, like the executive, for instance, who thinks she or he knows something because they purchased every Apple device for the last 10 years.
Yep. Anyway, you guys got to go on. I mean, we're slowing you down with all of your
No
great
worries. Yeah,
questions.
I looked at the time and I'm like, oh, I got to get through these slides. So what
Joe,
was?
these are the important ones. Don't let these slide. Don't let them go by me.
I'm sorry. One more time.
The slide you're on right now is straight to everyone's questions. So I make sure we go deep into this one.
Yeah. So logs are fantastic if they're set up properly. But 95% of organizations that we see, they're either inadequate or not the right things are turned on, or they don't go back far enough. We've really recommended to people that you keep your logs at least 6 months for all endpoints, for all servers, for all network perimeter devices. And you know, we keep getting pushback of, oh, that's going to generate so much data. It's like, you can buy a 16 terabyte hard drive on Amazon for about $400. You know, that you can't give me, or, you know, send it up to an S3 bucket or do whatever you need to do, but this is going to be what we need in order to go through things. And I haven't had a case where it's been like, oh my gosh, I have so many logs, I don't know what to do with it. It doesn't happen. What I get instead is a proprietary security endpoint that generates a log that is unintelligible unless I have that tool. I think one of the worst offenders of this is Darktrace. Darktrace logs that are outputted for us to review are almost unintelligible. And you know, and then you have Splunk, which will generate, you know, something like 600 columns for an event, and, you know, 590 of them are not useful. So again, it's walking through kind of that scenario like Michael and Brad and others have talked about, where go through the scenario of actually having to do this, like maybe a threat hunt exercise or something like that. So that way your DFIR team knows, hey, this is the type of log we're having. This is how we deal with it. This is what the information is that we're going to glean from this. But don't just assume that your team is going to be able to look at Darktrace logs and make any sense out of it.
Oh yeah, and don't forget, don't think you're going to be able to get the vendor to give you their logs.
Oh, yeah, that will never happen. Well, not in the time frame you want them.
Yeah.
You can't get them from Microsoft, not much.
Yep.
GoDaddy, you can't even get somebody to respond unless you file a lawsuit.
And default logging, just one simple example is failed logins at the workstation level are not normally logged. And that's information that's really, really important for us to have. So again, how did it occur? Who was the unauthorized individual? That's going back to the logs, but remember that sometimes attribution is not possible. If we see that the entry point is a Tor exit node that's coming out of, Russia or China or, an Eastern Bloc country, we're not going to get attribution without going to law enforcement or going to, some intelligence like that. And then what was the intentions? Well, that's where open source intelligence and threat intelligence that we have from our, dozens of cases of a similar ilk. So, when we walked into a case where we know it was Sodinokibi ransomware, we said, okay, it's normally gets in this way from previous cases that we've worked. So we, had a little bit of a head start on what to look for. So what are modern day cyber attacks like? To quote Daft Punk, harder, better, faster, stronger. We just wrapped up a case where I have never seen the attack escalate as quickly. And the walkthrough was like this. System first gets a regular user login via RDP using previously compromised credentials, and IT uses RDP, Microsoft Remote Desktop Protocol for administration. By the way, if your organization uses RDP using domain admin credentials and you don't have Windows 10 credential guard, it is a matter of time before you have to call us or another DFIR firm. Nobody should ever be using RDP and domain admin credentials ever. It gets cached on the system and and this is actually what happens. We had this exact attack happen. Hackers got in using came in out of a European country, using a regular user login, downloaded advanced IP scanner that runs at regular user, downloaded Mimikatz, and 14 minutes later logged in as domain admin from the same IP address. So the time from regular user to domain admin was 14 minutes. Does anybody have a SOC that's monitoring things that quickly? Because I don't know of one. And of course, they then, because everything had RDP on, they already mapped out the network and had a better network map than the client did because they ran modern tools against it. Laterally moved 6 hours later, every system had ransomware, including their Veeam backups.
So they've navigated through the entire network, took all the things they wanted.
Yep.
In less than 6 hours. And then at 6 hours, they
dropped ransomware
and asked for more money.
Yep. Oh, and when they tried to negotiate, by the way, this was Revil or R-Evil, however you want to pronounce them. So the people who were responsible for Kaseya also did this one, a little smaller. They only asked for what, I think 600,000 for this one.
Yeah.
And they paid 600,000. So yeah, it wasn't 75 million, but still a lot of money. When they tried to negotiate, they said, no, we have your financial documents. We know how much money you have in the bank.
Game over.
Game over. But 14 minutes is faster than I've seen going and escalating. Normally we talk about, dwell time of 30 days, 60 days, 14 minutes, and then 6 hours to be able to collect all the data they did is lightning fast.
That's a question about that.
Yes.
So we came to the same conclusion internally. In terms of not just RDP, but even backdoors to servers like iDRAX and things like that, to each of them only have a local login, not to be on the domain, and we'd write those down and put them in a fireproof safe. I mean,
right.
We're like moving backwards in time here, right?
Yep.
So, but if you have a bunch of vendors providing service to your servers, and I hate to ask such a silly question,
no.
and they can't use RDP, or do they still use RDP and we just don't give them domain credentials, local only, or?
The problem is even with local only, they can still extract local admin credentials using RDPs. RDP is a inherently weak protocol because Microsoft deliberately has a feature, essentially, where if you're not logged into the domain, it caches the previous anywhere from 5 to 30 logins in LSA secrets and other system level processes. So that way you can still log in as an elevated user, even if you're not connected to the domain. And if it caches that, it can be extracted out with Mimikatz. So that's the absolute flaw in there. So what I tell organizations is remote administration is fine. Do not use RDP. Use anything else, whether it's LogMeIn, whether it's Citrix, whether it's TeamViewer Professional, whatever it is else that you do, and make sure it's got multi-factor authentication and turn it on. One other attack that we saw a couple of years ago was somebody using their remote administration tool, not RDP, because the IT person, and I'll never forget this, said, I don't believe in multi-factor authentication. It doesn't do anything. And I said, it would have prevented the attack that dropped ransomware on 1/3 of your endpoints.
By the way, he was looking for a new job about 3 days later.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. Excuse me, but why did it take 3 days?
Brad?
It took HR that long to make sure they had all the paperwork together so he couldn't sue them.
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't pretty when I showed him and the rest of the team that it was his login that was the reason why they got compromised.
Literally.
Literally. So modern day cyber attacks. This attack that I just finished the report for this like 2 days ago, is just the latest illustration of what modern day attackers are doing. They're not dropping, a Metasploit shell on your system. They're using your own tools against you, whether it's your remote access tools, or they may be dropping PS exec, but they're not doing that much anymore. But they're using PowerShell a lot because PowerShell's default and on Windows. So why not use it? It's really powerful. And yes, you can drop Sodinokibi via PowerShell and never have it sitting in the file system. It's really interesting. I'll show you how to do that a little later. But that's where comprehensive logging comes in to differentiate legitimate IT versus rogue hacker activities. So where I was alluding to is fileless malware. Fileless malware is something we've seen, is something we've investigated. And what ends up happening is you have like an Adobe PDF exploit that has an embedded macro that looks like this. And your antivirus is not going to find this, by the way, because they're going to see this and, obviously, if you have anomalistic detection and you say, hey, there's a macro embedded in a Adobe PDF that's got cmd.exe in there, that, by the way, that's never good. That's always bad. And when you unpackage it, it's a PowerShell invocation and it downloads something from Pastebin. This is, by the way, an example of what's called an execution cradle. So the macro is a beachhead to download other bad things. And what else is it downloading? Well, it's downloading this big old function from Pastebin, and it's got PE 32 bytes, and this is a Windows 32-bit executable containerized in PowerShell. And what is it? It's Sodinokibi, which is, the really nasty piece of ransomware that REvil has been using lately, or REvil. So yeah. This was an example of ransomware not deployed on the file system. This was in memory only. Okay, and the only reason we were able to see this was because this particular attack, this particular environment had pretty good PowerShell logging enabled. Okay, so what are the concerns with fileless malware and these advanced attacks? Antivirus is not going to catch it, plain and simple. Your McAfee, your Symantec, your traditional signature-based antivirus will simply not find this. Okay? Your anomalistic detection, endpoint protection, your MHIPs, your managed host intrusion prevention systems may catch it. But if your attackers are running around your network using domain admin credentials, they've already turned it off, which we have seen. It's fun putting that into the timeline of this is the date and time that the attackers turned off your endpoint protection.
Because you only had it on 5 of the 6.
Yep. Oh yeah, that was true. Yeah, IT forgot to turn it on the last one. PowerShell commands may be sitting in the PowerShell operational log if you've enabled script block logging. But how many people here in your backups are backing up all of the Windows logs or just the big 3: application, security, and system? We just talked to an MSP who they said, yeah, we're backing up logs. And I said, which ones? And they said, well, application, security, and system. We don't need the rest, right? And I said, yeah, if you want me to be able to do any type of investigation, I need all of them. For example, the terminal services log will tell me all the RDP connections coming in and out of a system. So if you don't have that and they're running around using RDP, I can't tell you that. When we talk about the type of data that was accessed, a lot of people say, well, can't your logs tell you that? And the answer is yes, if you enable file auditing, which nobody does. Windows has the ability to audit user account accessing files at the file system level using file level auditing. But nobody turns it on because the amount of garbage that's generated from that from regular user activity is astronomical. So it's not something that we generally recommend, with one exception. And Brad and I actually just talked about this last night. It would be a very good idea to turn on file auditing on your critical data in your data map that you all have done at this point, specifically for domain administrators.
Right.
Because if you have hackers that have elevated to domain admin, they're going to then go after your critical data. But how many people have IT that are regularly accessing critical data using domain admin accounts? It is an anomalistic behavior. So one of the new recommendations that we're making to organizations is to enable file auditing only for domain admin credentials. Domain admins should never be opening files. They should be administering systems, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're an MSP, what do you tell your clients? Preparation is key. Having a DFIR plan in place, know who to call when something goes wrong, know who to escalate to when you look at things and things have gone wrong. Brad and I have seen time and time again that the repeat calls from organizations are always better than the first ones because they've been through this with us before and they've learned their lessons and they do it way better the second time than the first.
And I might add that, I mean, quite frankly, for those that have gone through our preparation plans or have just reached out to us to say, okay, would you please be the, can we add you into our DFIR plan as a vendor of choice, and that's who we're going to call. We also tell them, says, look, one of the choke points in DFIR plans is the trigger. When do they escalate from I've got an alert on the system, or I've got some log that is giving you a number of issues? What do is that enough by itself to trigger, calling the boss, rolling out the team and doing all the rest of it? He says, we're scared to do that because we don't want to cry wolf. We don't want to be, chastised by the bosses for spending money that didn't need to be spent. We told them, look, give us a call, free call. Tell us what happened. We'll give you a hint as to whether that's something you need to look at further or something that, no, tell the boss right now. Yep. It's a simple thing for us to know whether this is something you can determine or, wash aside by a couple of quick steps. And if that doesn't do it, then you need to have somebody come in and start taking a look.
Yep.
So it's an easy fix for us.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of we've talked about tabletops a lot, and we've talked about how they're a good idea, and they are a good idea, and we've been engaged in them. But understand that tabletop does not ensure that you have enough network visibility. And as we've gone through this so many times, so many clients, visibility is key. If there's one word to summarize everything about preparation, it's about visibility. Visibility, visibility, visibility. If you have no visibility, we can't help you. And you need to make sure that the visibility is there before you call and before the breach happens. What the tabletop does is it tests the plan, but it doesn't ensure that everything from a technical standpoint is there when everything goes wrong. Unfortunately, the only way to test, Brad, were you going to chime in? Or
I was just going to chime in one simple one. Usually before we do our preparation plans with clients, we send out a questionnaire.
Yep.
Ask for all sorts of information. And when we start to get in there and actually test those things, we find that they had answered out of memory or out of expectation. That's what they thought things were. They didn't go to look and see that that's the way they actually were. And when we did the testing, they in fact were not there. Certain things were not turned on. So many things were default as opposed to specialized configurations for the task at hand. So it's quite frequently what even IT thinks about its own systems and its own skills and its own planning is far from reality. It's just simple.
And oops, I skipped the slide. But in order to really see that invisibility that Brad and I are saying is lacking so many times, you really have to engage in what's called threat hunting. So threat hunting is like IR light. It is a mini incident response engagement to hunt for undetected threats. We go into a network as if it was breached, and only when we do our manual assessment do we say, yes, you don't have anyone in your network at this point in time that we can detect, or, hey, you don't have this visibility turned on, we can't see this. But it gathers the same relevant data that a full incident response engagement looks for. And yes, we have found undetected threat actors, because when we do a threat hunt, we start off and say, hey, you told us these domain accounts are legitimate. Here's this one that was created about 2 weeks ago.
And they didn't create it.
And they didn't create it. So that's always an interesting call to have with people is, yeah, we need to lock this account now, and we need to start looking at everything that they did now, because it's a rogue account and it's a domain admin, and let's see how this got, created and everything. So with that, we are out of time, but we'd be happy to entertain questions if people want to stick around a little.
First, let me just say, this was simultaneously fabulous and scary.
It's very
like,
terrified.
Very scary.
Because it's almost like no matter how prepared you are, you're not prepared.
Right.
I'm not sure if you saw my note, but I'd love to put some of this information in my next newsletter. It could, number one, I can give you guys a plug, right, for business, but it could trigger people to do the right thing. And maybe I don't know if that's the correct title for the position, data mapper, but we could start a trend and get people to start doing it.
It's close enough, honestly. And
yeah. So, I mean, my email's in there. I'd love it if you'd send me some information and if you'd like me to give you a plug. Yeah.
And Stan, we don't mean to be scary. I mean, some of the things certainly are, and there's no way to sugarcoat them and get around them. But much of what we're seeing, if there is some preparation ahead of time, the scariness really goes away quite a bit. It becomes a matter of, okay, this is part of my job. I do this, 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 and this.
Yeah.
I call these people, I bring in these resources. I call, make sure I have an attorney, make sure I have my insurance broker online, somebody for media representation. Things need to take place to make it less scary, and get a handle on the event and put it to bed as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So those types of things will really play a big role in successfully coming out the other end of an incident.
Yeah. Well, and as you know, because we've intersected on this often enough over the years, what you're saying is absolutely right. That failing to plan is planning to fail. And here, in Joe, your language of visibility, we have always seen that. And we've always seen, I think I can always, when we've looked here, or not when, as we look here, there's always weaknesses that they are not yet doing. I mean, I'll confirm, Joe, what you've said. I think, Michael, you see a lot of these as well. You know that when you go in, push comes to shove, there's, oh, I wish they'd done this. And they didn't. Now it's, the horse is gone.
Quite quickly, Stan, I mean, there are a lot of organizations that are doing things very much right. I think they're putting in place, multi-layered, multi-factor authentication, but multi-layered security defenses. But you can only defend against what you know. Defending against the unknown is really difficult. We all know that. But it's a leapfrog game. I mean, every time we put up a defense, they find a way around it or they find a new hole.
Yeah.
So it's not just the poor hygiene IT groups that are getting hit.
Yeah.
Some of them are quite good, and they're still being hit.
Well, it's, when we talk about a mentality, what I try to tell people is cybersecurity oftentimes is the mentality of you don't have to outrun the hungry tiger, just the poor schmuck next to you. And
although it is true that for as good as a lot of organizations have gotten at incident response, I mean, what I'm saying, with very few exceptions, is that most people are, for those of you who have an historical bent, I mean, most people are fighting a land war in Asia. They just don't get what the adversary environment is today.
Yeah.
And a great deal of this has to do with leadership, and a great deal of this has to do with the way people are thinking about incidents. Not necessarily the technology they have available, but thinking about these incidents and what you have to do to respond effectively, because you are going to get hit. No question about that. The only question is, what are you going to do?
And I agree, Michael. And I think some folks, IT, some of them even quite good, they're disrespecting their adversary because they don't understand just how sophisticated they've become.
Yes.
It's amazing. It's not just an individual. It's not some guy, in his parents' basement with a Pepsi bottle and a pizza. Those days are long gone. This is criminal corporate culture, cooperation amongst groups. It's a criminal enterprise in any language. Absolutely.
And along those lines, we've just held our second cybersecurity steering committee meeting, which is all the vice presidents of the company. They had to get dragged kicking and screaming into it, but because it's not their core business. And then we just formed a committee with legal, IT, and our org department to come up with a communication plan for when how do we communicate out in the world. So we're actually going to be documenting things. So it's not sexy stuff, but it's so important. And I was wondering, can I ask a really practical question as somebody's trying to administer a network and do several things at once?
Absolutely.
I'm getting pressure from people inside my IT organization not to use SMS-based MFA because of the fear of not SIM cracking. What's it called?
SIM swapping.
SIM swapping. And I wonder how big of a problem is that really? I mean, you have to fool your cell provider, right? To do the SIM swapping.
So
we could have a long conversation.
Yeah, Tim, you're the expert.
Yeah.
we have 3 or 4 active cases on that, and my sense is it's most prominent for people with cryptocurrency holdings. And we just arbitrated a case that I can't talk about, and we're in the midst of probably the most important of the cases brought by Michael Turpin. So if you want to contact me about that, I'd be happy to talk about it. But I probably now know more about this than I want to know. I don't think it's as prominent now as it was some years ago. I think the carriers have put in, it's a weakness in the carriers' authentication procedures that is leading to this, to allow either insiders, which is very prevalent, especially among authorized retailers who are not the company-owned stores. And it's also bound up now. I've just heard of my first case where there was a ransomware attack that was bound up with SIM swapping. So you may see that where they got control of the phone and got control of personal files, but not necessarily cryptocurrency itself, but then asked for a ransom to encrypt the files to return them. So happy to talk to you about it anytime.
Thank you.
You know, what I'm hearing in the discussion as well, that wonderful quote of Sun Tzu's, that if you don't know your enemy and you don't know yourself, you're imperiled in every battle. And it's, you know, knowing yourself is that visibility that you talked about, Joe and Brad, and knowing the enemy is that other piece of it. Knowing, okay, where are they coming in at? What's the, you know, how are they living off the land? What does that look like? You know, these fileless attacks, what do those look like? That's knowing your enemy as well. And it's really, I mean, it's 2,000 years old that it's, you know, Sun Tzu didn't have a computer, but he sure knew warfare. And he was absolutely right on this. If you don't know yourself and you don't know your enemy, you don't got a chance.
Mm-hmm. And I might add that there's been some talk lately about nation state actors and what they've, you know, the types of incursions into networks and the things they've done to various corporations and organizations. And I try to remind almost everyone I talk to is there are literally hundreds of thousands of military soldiers who are in cyber commands, not like ours in the US, China, Russia, Nigeria, many Eastern Bloc countries as well. Those folks work 6 days a week. And it's not always Sunday they have off, but it is usually Sunday they have off.
Yeah.
What do you think they do in their off hours, in the evening, and on the day off? They have the same skills, they have the same systems, they have the same knowledge. They go to work for themselves. So it's, we talk about them cooperating, a well-funded operation. They've got entire nations teaching them how to do these things and then taking it on the land and doing it for themselves. It's I like to think of it as it's the democratization, if you will, of the cyber group in these various countries. They have become very much into the privatization of their activities as opposed to just doing it for their country.
Yeah. That's, I'm going to shift the screen over to mine because you bring up this book. If you don't know yet this book, get it and read it. This is how they tell me the world ends. The cyber weapons arms race by Nicole Perlroth. It's, I mean, I've lived through this whole period. She is telling the story. I'm not yet finished with the book, phenomenally. And it's, Brad, to what you just said, just the enemy in its entirety is just enormous. And it's what we're fighting. We're going to have Nicole, by the way, for Secure the Village event, first quarter of next year, as one of the things we're talking to her agent right now. But this, I mean, and again, I've lived this for 20 years and at Citadel, and you know, got started in the industry in 1980 back at MITRE. And some of her story goes back to the 80s as well. Yeah, I've never seen this story told as well as Nicole Perlroth has, and how serious this challenge that we're facing is. in the discovery and selling of 0 days is so much of it. And so much, Joe and Brad, what you're talking about isn't even the 0 days. These are, breach or vulnerabilities that have been patched years ago. I mean, one of the things we do when we first go into a client is scan their network. And one of the metrics we have is how old is the oldest unpatched vulnerability for which a patch has existed. And it's not unusual for us to see 8-10 years still living on that network. I mean, that's, that's terrible. So I want to call this out. Also, in the interest of time, because I want to, it's got to kind of wrap up. I do want to point out, not everything is scary, unless you're afraid of being hit by a golf ball. Secure the Village is having our first annual ever golf tournament. We just went live. Anush, yep, good. If you golf, if you want to be a sponsor, lots of opportunities here. And this, let's, yes, we got to do our work, and we're in a war, but it's playtime also. Can't forget that as well. It energizes us for the other things. Brad, Joe, so grateful for you guys taking your time and spending a couple of hours with us. Grateful to all of you for attending as well and participating, for being part of the village. Put your name and an email and phone in the chat log if you haven't. Any final words before we adjourn?
This is great.
Okay.
Same here. Thanks again, Stan, for putting these things together and having us on. We really appreciate it.
Well, Brad, I'm so grateful for you guys for your not just willingness to share your knowledge and information, your enthusiasm about it, because that's part of what, as we reach out to those who still have work to do. Your enthusiasm, your energy, your openness, your visibility is so much of what this is all about, what we believe in here in Secure the Village. So thank you both. Thank you all. And with that, we are adjourned.
As long as everyone does their homework of making sure their network maps are up to date.
There you go.
Right.
Sounds great. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.